Hi listeners, Harika here, and I'm super excited to welcome you to Upptalk. If you're ready to learn and get your hands work wonders in the world of information technology, then you're in the right place. When I say Upptalk, we are not just another edtech company. Consider we are your learning partner committed to unlocking your full potential. Whether you're stepping into the world of technology for the first time or looking to advance your career, we provide top-tier, hands-on courses to build up your career. Let's take our first step towards learning here and explore it. Let's investigate SAP, a well-known enterprise resource planning system, and discover its many functionalities and business applications.
So we have User Defined System Defined Schema and SLLT Derived Schema. So the User Defined Schema is a schema which you create by your own. Like, this is not system generated like the one which we have with our own name. It's the system generated schema. But if you want to create a new schema, you can always do it. How do you do it? You select the system that you want. You select the system, you select the console, and you execute the query called create schema. And you can give any name that you desire. So file software product. And I am going to create a new schema. So I will click on execute. Once I click on execute, let's see if the new schema is created. So what is that? Let me see what is that. There is a schema called Temp1 already. So with the name Temp1, let me type Temp1. I will click on Temp1. It allowed me to create a schema called temp. Once you create any new schema, always perform a refresh so that the new schema gets reflected in your profile. This is the new schema and you have all the structure that you need in the schema. So you can create the objects that you desire. So earlier we failed to create the table. So I was able to create the table now. So let us create a sample table and let me show you how I do it. Just click on it. Select new table. The table name. Something called temp again. See your wish. You can give whatever name you want. There is some random value here. Something of your choice. Just click on it. So that is how you create the table. Once your table is created, always remember to refresh. And unless you refresh this, you are not going to see any data here, even though you create some data in it. Now this is your table. This is the table that we have created. So you can see all the information that you need in this table. We want to see only the content. If you don't want to make any changes in the table, you can always choose this. It will show you the content of the table. Like what value does it have? We have only one entry in it, which is blue. So now it is showing you the blue. As I said, for each and every click that we perform here, that we do it manually. In the background, you will be able to see that we are executing a query. And which standard user ID is responsible for this? If you can go through your notes, which I have given to you yesterday. So underscore sys underscore sq l underscore analyzer is a standard user ID which is responsible for any query execution system. So whatever query you are executing, the owner of this query, who is executing it in the background, is this user ID. User ID sys underscore sql underscore analyzer. That is what is happening here. So this is your, let me show you this. That is your user defined schema. Any schema that you create on your own, or any schema that is defined by the user by a standard database user is user defined schema. So the system defined schema is a schema which is getting created at the time by default. The same name as your user ID is your system defined schema. That is one of the examples. And all the standard schemas that come by default. So these are all the standard schema that you are able to see. This are for SysBig Bag. All these schemas are what? All these schemas come under system defined schema. Like you are not creating these schemas. These schemas are coming by default whenever a user ID is created. These schemas are coming by default in your catalog section. So you are going to only have, unless because this user ID has wider access. The system user ID has wider access. So it will. Let me create any data in this standard. What do you say? Standard schemas. But usually what happens in the real-time scenario, when you create a user ID and you have your own user ID, you are only allowed to view the data under these standard schemas. You will not be able to create any new data under these schemas. Like, let us say if you want to create any view under this. So you can also see that there are already many standard views here. So if you want to create any new view or something, so this is the view that they have created under the view section. This is the standard view. That is, they have created some BIMC or authorized cubes. So this is the data that they have under this. So if you want to create some new view under the standard schema, like it is not allowed, you can only view the data which is already there in the standard views. Unless and until you have elevated access, like I am using the system user ID now. It is the ultimate user ID which is provided by SAP. So now I am able to do it. I will show you those scenarios as well if you don't know. When I create a test user ID and log in with the test user ID, you will come to understand like what I am saying. Don't worry about that. So that is your standard schema. Let's see the third point here. So these are all the standard schemas, as I said, as I showed you now the system. So these are, each and every schema stores different types of data here. SYS underscore BI stores meta to create of all the created column views. And BAC usually stores the data of the H&M models which are activated in the system. And repo is a very main schema actually. Repo is a very important schema. So in repo you have all the objects under this repository. As I said earlier, suppose if Iman is leaving the company, he has all these objects created under his schema. So let us say we are deleting his ID. So what happens? We are going to lose the data. So to avoid this to happen, SYS underscore repo is a responsible repository to store all your data. And which user ID stores this data in the SYS underscore repo. We have the system user ID called SYS underscore repo. With the same naming convention, we have another user ID, SYS underscore repo, if you remember as part of our discussion. We have seen that SYS underscore repo is an internal database user. For what? for HANA repository activities. For the standard HANA repository activities, what this user ID does is that, so whenever you create, suppose Iman is creating some use under his schema, some objects under his schema. So what this standard user ID will do? The standard user ID will replicate the same data which Iman is creating, and it will save this data in this standard schema, which is sys underscore repo. So this is very important. So that is why the standard user ID and standard schema, if you are able to understand. So you can confidently say, like, we do not lose the data, and all the standard schemas or all the standard data which is created under the schema, standard user schema is preserved under sys underscore repo repository. So this is where you save all the object data that is created in your system. And the user ID, which is responsible to save all the data in this repository, is your sys underscore repo. This user ID is responsible for that. So always make sure that all the standard user IDs, which I am listing here, are active, except for the system user ID. It depends upon your organization. Again, if it is going to ask you to keep it activated, keep it activated. So it all depends on the compliance here. So every organization has its own compliance process and their methodology. Based on that, you can use the system user ID or not. It's up to you basically. But all the user IDs, and also ignore this user ID. This is only used at the time of installation, and you will not see this user ID under the user tab. And all these user IDs were A, FLEPM, repo status, S, QLL analyzer. All these user IDs are very important. All these 5 user IDs are important. Make sure that you never deactivate these user IDs in your system. Suppose you are deactivating sys underscore repo. Consider that you are losing all the backup that you need. If a user exits the organization, so what happens? You lose all the data that is under him. So it is not automatically saved under the standard repository directory. So you will not be able to see any data under sys underscore repo. Be very careful. And same goes to sys underscore statistics. sys underscore statistics. User ID does the same. Like, it takes all the audit log that we have enabled, and it is going to save under the schema sys underscore statistics schema. Simple. Sys underscore x also does the same thing. X is nothing but what all third-party applications are connected to your HANA database. What it does is it saves all the data which is coming from this this third-party applications into the schema. And the responsible user ID is also similar to it. sys underscore xs. There is also another user ID sys underscore x. So, as I said, these are your standard schemas. Where is this sys report? Under the sys repo, let us say you are creating some views under your own schema. So all these schemas will automatically get replicated here. And also, for this to happen, you have to keep this user ID, and you have to always keep this user ID. In fact, you should never deactivate this user ID or never test this user ID. And basically, you'll have access to all the schemas, all the objects that are under this sys underscore repo by default, with the public role which is assigned to you while creating the user ID. You are not going to save the schema names itself under sys underscore repo. You will not be able to see any schema names here. You will only be able to see the objects which are created under that schema under sys underscore repo. So this SLLT derived schema, I'll come to it a bit later in the next topics. It's not the topic that we are going to discuss anytime soon, because to discuss this topic, I have to explain to you the application server, which is X engine that we have in HANA DB. Then I'm going to explain to you about this SLLT derived schema. Then you will be able to understand, because I'll not be able to show it to you away. So before going to this privilege and all that, maybe you something explained. But let me see what I've added. So object privilege, you have seen it yesterday. You have seen me assigning all object privileges. So what object privileges did I assign yesterday to best user ID? I was saying the object privileges, nothing but you. You're going to send the schema that you have created. So if you want to give some schema access to other user, you can always send the object to this user ID. Let me show you that. So in the object privileges, I said I was able to show you like I was assigning execute or select statements. So what does it mean? This is where I elaborated a few privileges to show you what access we are going to go. We are into the system. User ID here. Let me see all these user IDs. Yesterday, what we have done, we have created. So let's create a new user ID instead. So how do you create users? You create users by doing the click here, creating a new user. Only difference between user and restricted user is that you're going to check and uncheck the JDBC or DBC server access. And this new restricted user is for third-party users who are not going to on a DBC. Let me create a test user ID. So what happens if I select this option is that so often I do my first log in as a test user. ID, so that is what you do in your ideal scenario. In the real-time scenario, you never select this option as no whenever you're given a new password, because I shouldn't know. I shouldn't know your password as an admin. But once you log in, the first thing that you have to do is that you have to reset this password to a new password so that no one knows your password. This is all crucial data that you are dealing with. Let us see if you are deleting some model or something or some objective that you have created in the system. You never know. Like there can always be an outage here. Don't take any chances with this user ID. This is HNNADB user. ID is very HNNDB access is very restricted and is very critical in an organization. So I have given the initial password here. I'm going to save this user ID. I'm going to execute this user ID and what role is assigned here by default. I did not do it. The system itself is doing it with the help of which user ID. This user ID is a standard user ID which assigns a public role whenever you are creating a new user. So please don't forget this. This is the basic thing. So once we are going into the roles concept, we are going to assign more roles here by creating the custom roles, and by assigning the required privileges to those custom roles. We are going to create different users. So what kind of users are there in our system, in HoneyDB system? Administrator users and common is administrator users and system users. Two kinds of users are there. So under administrator users, we are administrator users. Modelers will be there. Developers will be there. Three kinds of users will be there. So we are going to create different roles, one for security admin, one for basis admin, one for modeler, one for developer. We are going to create 4 or 5 roles which will complete our role management concept. But before you dive into the role concept, you should understand all these privileges. What is a system privilege? What is an object privilege? We already covered system privilege. I'm going to show it to you now. So system privilege we have object privileges, analytical privileges, package privileges, application privileges. So if you need to understand all these privileges in order to be ready to create any roles in the system. So this is one way of creating a user ID. There is another way that you can create a user ID. So you do now select the system, open the SQL console. Is it open? Let me create a user ID. Create user hello. Password. Password should always be in double quotes. We have to give the initial password and once you're done with your query. So this is the query statement. This is the SQL query statement which allows you to create users. But in the ideal scenario, we never use this query. But let us say you have to create 100 users at a time. 100 users at a time. Let us say we have to assign 100, like the same privilege to 100 users. You cannot be creating these users manually. Simply enter the SQL statement. Not even that you will copy this SQL statement into the WordPad. And if you are good with scripting, I think so, you might have already used the script in the Word document. You can use this and you can create an Excel document as an input document for your Word document. And you can basically use that script to create all the user ID statements. So I'm going to show it to you. If you're not familiar with this thing also, it's not an issue. I'm going to show you how we can create mass users at a time by creating multiple queries. But these two fields will be our input fields, which we are going to get data from the Excel. We are going to generate multiple lines, multiple SQL lines for multiple users, and we are going to create users. Any number of users that you like at the same time for privilege. So we are going to do the same thing. Let us say if you want to send the same privilege to user, or for that instance, you can assign multiple privilege to different kinds of privilege to different users at a time using a script. That is easy. I'm going to show you to look at the base and the comment sessions. So the user ID is created with the password speed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you want to log in as that user, you can do it. So let me try to log in. Remember that's hello and speed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what are we going to do? Access from different user. What is the user? ID user is hello. So if you click on store username and password, it is not going to ask you the user ID and password once again. So whenever you open your workspace, you'll be automatically logged into the system. I'm going to click on things. I'm able to log as user. But now I'll not be able to have anything except for the basic view. All have always have you access. All always have you access. For all the standard data that is there in the system because of its role, because of the public role. This is the standard role which comes by default in the system. And public roles hold all the data that is there in your system. We'll be able to view all the data once this public role is assigned by the system. That is how I created the user ID. I'll be able to see the attached user ID by default. Earlier you saw that you were able to access. You were able to see all the content and everything. But in order to see the content, the standard content, event, or your own content like your own content, what you need to do, you need to have a particular privilege assigned to you, which I'll show you. It's just repository under S. Let me assign that repository to you. Sorry, I had to take a break. You can assign this privilege, then only you will be able to see the content here. So how do you assign this repository? How do you have assigned this access? You can go to user. So I'll again go as a system user. The system user ID has the privilege to assign the access. Hello cannot assign privileges on his own. What I'm going to do, I'm going to search for the user ID hello. Again, you have to refresh in order to get the content here. Now you should be able to see the user ID. I'm able to see hello. Hello has no privileges assigned to him, so it's obvious that he's not able to see any data in the content folder. Let me show you. This repository underscore rest is the standard privilege that you need in order to see the data of content. Along with it going to give only execute access here. I'm not going to give any other access. I'm only going to execute. Once you are able to perform any action successfully, you'll be able to see that the user is successfully changed. Or else you're going to see the error message as well. Always remember that if you're going to see the error message, something has failed. We have to analyze this issue. Here, see, it is a different thing. You're not assigned. You're not. Now, you have not assigned a schema here. Instead, you have assigned the privilege that is needed to access your content folder. If a user wants to access his content folder, he has to have repository rest with execute access. Then, only then, he'll be able to see any data under your content folder. And always remember to give only execute access for the repository on this process. And who is the owner for this? It's the system user ID, which is the owner for this repository. Now see if I'm able to see this. I'm going to assume user hello again. Just refresh it once. And I will get no privileges to you. Let's refresh your user ID. There is no content available, so that's why you're not able to see anything. But if I assign some packages here to this user ID, so now he doesn't have any packages. I can create a new package to you. Any new packages, also of your own. You have to have this repository on this project, otherwise you'll not be able to see. So let us see. And in best. So there are some packages already. I've created this dummy packages earlier to show it to you. So I have created some package under the system. Sorry, where do you access package? Access package under content. So what I did, I created a temporary package here called TMP90 and I created an attribute view. We don't get confused. We are not going to create any attribute views in the system. Usually, I created a styles template. Just an attribute view with no data here. But I'm going to show you a sample attribute view. I'm going to create some sample views so that I can show you how I restrict this access and all the roles in the session. So for that, I created a temporary view like I've clicked on the package. I went to new and I selected attribute view and I just clicked on execute to save this temporary view. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel. For more information, contact us sales@upptalk.com.